The Fire Nation is embarked on a dark path. And the world might never recover. The world needs the Avatar. It needs you, Aang.
The Fire Nation has destroyed everything in their path. If the world is gonna have any chance, it's gonna need Aang.
Right. There goes the savior of the world.
I've chased down every hint of the Avatar. It's my destiny.
I'm not someone who can stop the Fire Nation. I don't want the responsibility.
You don't have to do this alone. You have me, Tara, and a flying ball of fur. What more do you need?
The world needs you. Remember what it is we're really fighting for. The ones we love.
I'm the Avatar, and I'm gonna save the world. With my friends.
Kelly. I'm a colorist, I'm an image scientist, I'm an educator, and I'm really here just to ask a bunch of questions of these three gentlemen to my right. I have Siggy Ferstl, senior colorist at Company 3, and Marion Spates and Jabbar Raisani, respectively series VFX supervisors and series VFX supervisor and series executive producer for Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is the subject of our conversation today. So yeah, we're going to be exploring the workflow, the kind of unusual workflow, and specifically the color grading workflow and kind of how it overlapped with visual effects for the first season of this show. So I'm excited to dive in. And maybe we should start by just checking out this first clip, right? Yeah, come on. Come on. How cool was that? Oh my goodness. Okay, you guys all have 6 hours, right? That's how long it's going to take us to chop up everything that we just watched. Wow, really cool. I guess a good place to start. Let's start with you guys, Jabbar and Marion. Tell me about just kind of like from the outset of this show, designing these visuals, like before you'd captured a frame, before you were in color and figuring out how it was going to relate to VFX, just like designing these visuals. What thought process went into that? What did you know you were going to do kind of from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts a lot with just what is the vision for the show. We knew we wanted this giant epic show. We knew we wanted to have a lot of different looks in color. We knew that we weren't going to accomplish it all in visual effects. So that's just our big, broad palette of what we were going to achieve. Prior to this season of Airbender, we worked with Siggy on 28 episodes of television. So, we had a pretty, established relationship of where visual effects would end and where color would begin and where that line gets blurry. And even in watching this reel here, like it looks like a VFX reel, which is cool to watch. It's like, oh yeah, it looks like a compositing reel, but no, that's a color reel. And that's one of the things that has continued to evolve. And between season 3 of Lost in Space, which is the last time we worked together, and season 1 of this, like the tools have gotten even better and better and better. And we came in and Siggy was like, hey, look at all this new stuff I can do. And that just changes the way that we then think about our process as visual effects supervisors is, okay, we know what we have to do, and we know there's a lot of new stuff that we're going to do in color with Siggy. And then it's just a conversation and a collaboration between, where visual effects ends and where color begins. And it's very, very blurry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Marion.
Technically, that's not sped up footage. That's Siggy. That's Siggy actually working, So Siggy's
the music going the whole time.
yeah. So and Nutter Butters, but that's another topic. The one thing that we've done since Siggy from the very beginning is really collaborate from the very beginning, even while we have green screen there before the visual effects is even done, because our vision is like, hey, what do we want this sequence to look like color-wise? Because obviously the DPs go on set and they create these amazing CCC files that we work, but we collaborate with Siggy to make sure, hey, is that the best choice for the sequence? Obviously we want to be true to what the DPs are envisioning, but we really tackle everything from the very beginning so that way there's not surprises down the road. I mean, there is surprises all the ways down the road, but it really minimizes those surprises because we do collaborate from the very beginning stages.
And sometimes that's doing what we call a pre-color. So if the dailies weren't really representative of the direction, or the direction of the scene has changed, one of the things that we're really good at is being able to flag that early for me to do a pass and then allow visual effects to see a better or a closer version of what the final scene is going to be. And so we do a pre-color, and the advantage for that is that when they're doing the visual effects, it's a far more accurate balance of the CG elements and the compositing elements when it comes to me. And one of the things on this show is that not a single matte was delivered from visual effects for the entire season, which is pretty unheard of on a
Very unusual.
on a very heavy effect show like this. So it was either because visual effects were able to see closely what we were doing in color and were able to really dial in visual effects, or we were able to use some of the tools in color correction like Magic Mask and Depth Map to separate sort of foreground and background elements.
And just for quick context for anyone who's not already familiar, when Siggy talks about mattes being provided, that's a very standard part of a visual effects heavy show workflow, as he mentioned, where you would have a highly detailed matte, like a rotoscope level matte pulled by a visual effects artist, who then provides that to the colorist so that they can grade a particular element or exclude a particular element with high precision in a way that our tools are traditionally not set up to do in Resolve, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, no, it's something that we started way back in the day, and when we tell our vendors we don't use mats, they don't even believe us.
You're lying.
And like it all starts back from the very beginning, and it's understanding what the final look's going to be like before you go into do color. And that's the problem. I mean, well, I can't say that's the problem. I feel like that's the problem. I've had the fortunate experience to work only in this really collaborative workflow. And if you wait till the very end to do your color and you provide all these mats because you want to articulate something at the end, I mean, that's just kind of like creates a lot of extra work for the vendors. It also creates a lot of work for Siggy. He has to manage all those mats. So if you just like nip it in the butt in the beginning and understand what your goal is, you can save a lot of your vendors, a lot of yourselves, Jabbar and I's work on the back end, which is something we really strive for.
Super cool. I want to look at more clips. Do we have some scenes we can look at?
Yeah, I'll play the next clip.
It's kind of like your soul and your body. Separate, but connected.
That makes sense.
Gyatso had a way of making things easy to understand. He made everything easy.
He sounds amazing.
He was.
You know, I've always felt I was a spiritually attuned person. That might be why I crossed over with you.
Oh, is that a frog or a froggy thing?
I have no idea how he got in here.
The villagers are probably trying to find a way out. They're probably looking for something familiar.
Assuming they realize they don't belong in here.
None of you belong in here.
Who said that?
Who said what?
No human belongs in this realm.
That is one big birdie.
Wow. Okay. I'm dying to hear about this. It's actually really cool that we got to see a little bit of the process of creating these images in our initial clip. So, first question, was the foliage that color before you graded it?
No, it was certainly not that color before. And this was a real collaboration between Marion and Siggy. You know, Marion went through this footage, had varying amounts of atmosphere throughout the sequence. It was it was extremely varied shot to shot. And so Marion really found what were our worst case scenario, what was the most atmosphere, what was the least amount of atmosphere, and really picked those out. And then Siggy and Marion worked together to figure out what was possible in color. I'll leave it to you two guys to kind of talk in more detail about how you went about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was, I think, one of the very first scenes you came in to play around with, and I was really just getting up to speed in terms of all the looks of the spirit worlds and getting my head around it, because you came in with a whole bunch of references. You came in, it's like, we're not sure, we think it might be red or blue, magenta, but magenta's my least favorite color in the world, so I really don't want to go magenta. So it was a real experimental process. We pushed it in various directions, taking the foliage and probably quite coarsely, just trying to feel our way through it, and then before we really sort of developed the look, until it was quite tricky to kind of choose the direction we wanted to go in this lavender. I won't use the word magenta.
Thank you.
This lavender world, and it was definitely not. We didn't hit it in the first session. We had quite a few sessions. This was one of the most trickiest sequences to really find where it should sit. And Marion did a lot of work. It was a sort of backwards and forwards. You came in initially with some ideas.
Yeah. First up, when I looked at it, I'm like, oh God, what are we going to do with all this fog? Like, fog is everywhere, and how are we going to like key and color all these leaves? I'm telling Jabbar, I'm like, because Jabbar and I weren't actually on the show. Wait, I wasn't on the show the entire time. Jabbar is fortunate to be on the show for production because he directed 2 episodes. So, this footage is something that we've seen, and we're like, okay. So I was like, man, this is a bit of a problem. I mean, luckily they stopped using fog because I think Gordon was a little bit uncomfortable with the fog, which actually, worked out. So when I was doing my own tests, I was like, okay, well, I think this can kind of work, but it's getting a little bit messy. But for me in Nuke, it was like a lot of work to try to like even do like the dev shots, right? So I worked with another vendor, a vendor that Nexus, like an in-house vendor slash, there are a vendor that worked with us. And then once we realized, okay, I think we can key like through this fog, we brought to Siggy some ideas, and then Siggy's tools actually, to me, is even way better than in Nuke. Like Siggy like got in there and really fought through this fog and really like took this idea and made it come about. And the way that he was able to do it, it was so much faster than if a traditional workflow through Nuke would have happened. I mean, it's literally, and he's also doing it in like real time, which was pretty phenomenal. So, through our collaboration and my testing and Jabbar's great eye, we figured out something that we liked. And Siggy actually sat with our post supervisor, and they came up, they had a few different styles. So at first it was like, is it going to be blue, which is my favorite color? But the other scene was blue, so then we had blue and magenta. So Siggy was able to just come up with these like different looks that worked so well. And with his roto tools and his AI tools that he has, and I don't want to misrepresent your tools, so please stop me. It was pretty amazing how we were able to take this and actually make it what it is so quickly, just in the resolve, which was like unbelievable. And Jabbar has the control to art direct it into a way to where he's happy with it, Netflix is happy with it, and it came about, and it was like, wow. It was like, holy cow. And then the cool thing was, we actually did our CG, and Siggy colored all of our CG the same way, which, when does that happen, right? When do we actually say, hey, Siggy, take our CG, the green trees that we didn't change, and now turn that all green without any mats or anything, which is pretty phenomenal, so.
But yeah, I think a big part of this whole sequence was it was hundreds and hundreds of shots at the end of the day. And for me, with my EP hat on, I was like, I don't want to push these all to visual effects. Like the cost, the throughput, the effect it's going to have on our VFX team. It was really like, can we do these shots in a way that keeps them out of our pipeline? Because that just really helps us as a relatively small visual effects team trying to push through this giant show. An extra 200, 300 shots, that's a big weight on our team's shoulders. And anything we could do to keep that out of the VFX pipeline was really beneficial. And this is a really good example of just a really high shot volume that didn't have to go through the VFX pipeline.
So, Siggy, colorist question for you. When Jabbar says, can we keep all this in the box in color and keep it out of the VFX pipeline, and you haven't done it yet, what's your answer? You're just like, yeah, we'll figure it out?
I'm one of those artists who's like, yeah, bring it on.
No problem. I got you.
And then I figure it out later. But yeah, I mean, we've worked together enough to, and these guys are, not only creative but technically know what, the basis of what I can do. So if they feel like I can do something, I'm pretty confident that, they're not going to ask for like a curved ball that's going to tie me into a corner or push me into a corner, and I'm not going to be able to get out of it. So I feel pretty comfortable working with these guys, and we do have an open and honest conversation about what can and can't be done. And this look, it was kind of, Marion is talking about like keying through the fog, but it's, you also have the ground, which, and the bark of sort of stumps and the tree trunks, which needed to maintain their natural color. So there was some difficulty in getting blending those edges. The actual greens of the trees was quite simple, but it's when they blend into other colors where any colorist would know that that's the most difficult part of the process. And initially it was kind of a more sort of solid color, and I was trying to figure out ways to improve the look, and I was looking online and sort of came across infrared photography, and it kind of inspired me to sort of develop the look a little more. And what I did was as a sort of a separate layer, as the colors sort of lightened up, I also desaturated them. So the tones were in the same hue range, but as they lightened up, they lost saturation, and it kind of fitted with the scene, and sort of became, it was quite a natural way that you're still in the same palette, but it wasn't so intense and sort of just one block of color. So that was sort of another thing I did to sort of improve or finesse the look a little more.
Well, that really stands out to me, that texture that you're talking about, like the natural variation of tone, like within the foliage or on the ground. Like it doesn't feel like you dumped a bucket of lavender paint on the surface.
Yeah.
And that actually leads me to another question I wanted to ask you about, is like texture. Is there anything else textural going on here or for that matter, any of the rest of the show that is unusual or unique?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Jabbar mentioned to me right at the beginning, it was like he felt that everything looked very clean out of the camera, and was there a way to make it a little more gritty, a little more textured? And one thing we did a lot on our previous show together is used lens reflections. So we kind of developed that a little more, and then we also another idea was to take sort of highlights and flame torch lights and things like that, and come up with this distorted feel of all the highlights. So we literally, on every torch flame, we applied this distortion to the highlights, added some glow. We added lens reflections that kind of which was inspired by sort of highlights or explosions. We also did anamorphic edge diffusion on the edge of the frame. So lots of little tricks like that, just to make the image a little more gritty. And one other thing we did, because it was kind of an early conversation, because a lot of this was shot on a volume wall, not this particular scene, but there was a way to blend the colors of the foreground and background, and one of the ideas I came up with, which was quite successful, is use a film emulation lookup table, which was that was a way to take, because sometimes the colors of the wall didn't quite line up with the foreground colors. So the film emulation LUT, which wasn't just a standard LUT, I took all the gamma out, so it was just working on a linear, in a linear fashion, and it was only kind of dialed in 30%, so it wasn't like heavily used. It was really just to take the color range and bring the color palette from the foreground to the background together, without sort of giving it a too heavily film contrast. So that was another element. So a lot of little things to get you there, and then some grain as well. There was a touch of grain, but once again, it wasn't like heavily used.
I mean, the sum of it, high five to all you guys. This feels like so painterly, even though it's like a very pushed thing that's happening. It feels that like the way it's rendered is really beautiful. And I think the last thing I wanted to ask before we take a look at another clip is, we talked about pulling keys and not doing traditional VFX mats, and like really creating the map for how you're going to introduce this lavender, all within Resolve's color page. For my colorists in the room or who watch this later, can you give us a insight into that, Siggy? Like, are you just pulling a qualifier and doing that? What's your
Doing this?
Yeah, what's your secret sauce?
I can't say that. I have to kill it.
Ken, but you'll have to kill me. I want to live.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of just qualify work, magic masks to help isolate skin tones from other sort of warm areas. Some rotor work, traditional rotor work, window work, and then I use some color compression as the color compressor, which is one of my favorite tools. Just sort of taking some of the simplifying the palette in a way, and taking some of the edges. And the trick with all this is how you layer it in the order you do everything. So
Don't worry, I committed all 60 of your nodes and their order to memory.
yes,
I know how. Super cool. We got some more stuff, right? Let's
yeah,
the clip.
let's go to the next bit.
We could advance a division here. With the enemy's firepower focused on that diversion, we can launch pinning attacks here and here.
If you send them into the heart of the forces, how will they retreat?
They won't.
But they'll be lost. You're gonna sacrifice them.
Sacrifice is a part of war. What division do you suggest?
The 41st. They're mostly new recruits. They're expendable.
Good.
Wow. Whole other world now.
Yeah.
Okay, so walk us through this, like at a high level, I guess. Maybe Jabbar and Marion. Like, what are we looking at, and how was this? How were these images formed in the first place?
Yeah, so high level, we're looking at footage shot on stage on the volume that was taken to, I'll call it final, but all in color with Siggy. And the challenge with this footage was there were certain aspects of lens distortion, heat distortion, some overexposure that we weren't able to fully gain on the volume, but we thought we could probably push the rest of the way with color. And so we took this to our visual effects vendor, Pixelmondo, who did a great work on this exact volume. In the volume, they built this entire asset, and we said, hey, can you do a shot and just show us, what you would be able to do using all the visual effects tools? And then we took that to Siggy and said, okay, here's a really good target. From what you're seeing here, can you match this feeling in color just with all of your tools? And then Siggy did a test for us. We came in and looked at it, and it was an amazing match to what they were doing in visual effects. So it was a really good collaboration of just using visual effects to do Marion and my traditional workflow of like revolutions and getting the feeling and the look right, but then taking that as a, here's our final that we want to target, and then letting Siggy go to work with a really good visual example of what we were after.
Yeah, and it was one of the more challenging scenes. I mean, it probably doesn't look like it, but there was a lot to be done. The entire background had to be isolated, so there was a lot of masking and rotoing going on. Using sort of fast noise to create heat haze and sort of contrast edges to make the sort of the dragon on the back wall sort of more metallic, glows for the flames, and also I sort of analyzed the flicker of the flames to create flicker on the foreground. So the foreground and background would marry up a lot better. What else? And then I created some using, once again, like fast noise plugin just to create reflections of the flame in the front facing steps, which is something what the visual effects guys did, and blended those in. So it was quite, I think, there was, I'm not sure what the percentage breakdown, but, I mean, maybe 70% of the shots were done visual effects, and then I probably hit 30% of the other shots.
I think in this set you did more than that.
Okay.
I think you were doing the heavy lifting in this set 'cause it probably saved us. There's probably 10 scenes in here over the course of the season. It was probably I have to imagine a couple hundred shots that you ended up doing in color instead of again pushing through the VFX pipeline.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just on that point, Jabbar, like, what is the impact of that on the production? What does that mean to the production when that just gets pulled out of the VFX pipeline entirely?
Yeah, I mean it's a big impact for us. We're doing how many shots we end up doing?
We did 3,500 shots, and we were looking at 250 shots per day when we got well over into the last several months. So, if I think we did 1,100, I think Siggy did 1,100 shots in color that he then, brought to our, what we would call our final as far as when it looks at these types of shots across multiple episodes.
Yeah, those are shots that, we had this bucket of shots that were, this could be visual effects, it could be color. We didn't know when we started. And we kind of put them all on the board and said, this is a question mark. And some of them had to go to VFX and use traditional VFX methods. But, whatever it was, 1,100, 1,200 of those Siggy handled. They never had to go through our pipeline. And that's, between Mary and I, looking at 250 visual effects shots a day, that is a lot of hours looking at shots, a really hard volume to push through any pipeline, not just Marion and myself, but all of our support team that has to deliver all those notes to vendors, all the new revs that vendors have to do, cutting 200, 300, 400 shots out of that. It's a huge percentage of work that doesn't have to go through our pipeline that just saves us time and money.
Specific question on when I'm looking at the sort of like dynamic speculars on the characters here that feels obviously motivated by the fire. Is that in camera? Was that something that was done after the fact?
I think most of that is in camera.
That's in camera.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we did a lot on set to try to like capture as much as we could. There's just certain things that you can't get to 100%, and it doesn't just apply to on set. It's one of the things that working with Siggy for so long that we really, when we're supervising shots, we have a status that is DI notes, and that is we'll get a shot to where we think we can do the following notes with Siggy, and we literally make a list that is what we're going to do with Siggy, and he gets that list. When we go into color, which we do every visual effect shot, we look at with Siggy in color, and there will be a list of we want to adjust this highlight, we want to adjust this color, we want to adjust this saturation, and then Siggy has his own whole list of things. When he looks at it, he's like, and we should also do this, this, and this. So we really look at Siggy as like our final compositor, and there are things that we final a shot knowing that we can finish it with Siggy, and then for those few things that we can't or the things that come up in color, we do kick it back to the vendor, but we really reduce the amount of revs we do with the vendor because we know we can do so much in color.
Yeah, and in those circumstances too, we'll then make a style frame that we've dialed in with Siggy, so that way he's not having to worry about like working on every single frame, and then that would be our target that the vendor does. So when it comes back to Siggy, half of his work, maybe even 3/4 of his work is done. It's just like the final touches.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of an atypical workflow that we do, which is we get a shot to, I'll say like a 50% final, but it represents the color that we're kind of going for. And then we just bring in that in with Siggy. And then we get a whole round of notes, from Siggy where he's like, I would do this and this and this. And then he applies what he would do just on a single frame. Then we send that to the vendor as the style frame match from color. So that's something that, we really started doing maybe season 2 of Lost in Space,
Yeah.
and it became this new workflow between VFX and color I had never done, where it's this midway stop along the VFX final delivery, but you do it on one shot or one shot in this direction, one shot in that direction, and then everything just flows much more smoothly through color. Season 1 of Lost in Space where we weren't doing that, we had a lot of stuff that we got in color, and Siggy's like, this just isn't gonna get there. And so you end up with a lot of kickbacks, a lot of surprises in color. And then season 2, we really sat down and said, okay, how are we going to have a better workflow from end to end? And that started with a color pipeline that we really revamped season 2 of Lost in Space. And then this whole workflow of like, not just color end to end, but like the VFX look pipeline. How do we make sure what we're delivering is more in line with what we're going to final? And those two things really cut down on things going back from color into visual effects.
I love how like everything you guys are talking about, there's such a fluidity in terms of like traditional definitions of role players within the process, but there's like a formality to it or a system or a logic that you're also applying, I guess, based on your experience from Lost in Space and even this process. It's just very cool and sounds like a really fun, collaborative way to work. That's great.
Yeah. It took a long time to get there. It was a lot of working together. There was, some tougher days in the bay than others, but that's the thing about collaborating and working together. It was never ego. It was always like we all want the same thing.
Yeah.
Like let's figure out where the process is breaking down and let's fix it. Because look, I don't know everything about color. I just know what I want it to look like. A lot of people know a lot more than about color than I do. There was one day where we had Dolby was in there. All the Netflix color scientists were in there. We're all in the bay, and everyone was like, "Okay, what's wrong, and why isn't it what we want it to be?" And like we just got to the bottom of it. And after that, we really figured out a lot of technical things that were preventing visual effects and color from being on the same page. And it's that kind of stuff that I think we continue to do. And that's when you asked a question earlier, like, "Oh, is it a lot of stress to take on 200 shots that are visual effects?" Well, the reality is, and what we try to do is, Siggy's not saying yes once. He's saying, I think so, let's try. And then we push forward. And if he comes back and says, you know what, this shot I can't do, or these shots I can't do, it's not a big deal. It is us collaborating and finding the show together. It's not a, hey, you said yes, now you have to do it. It's working together. We're trying to figure out how to make this thing.
No, it's never that. I mean, it really is just, I might be able to do 9 out of the 10 shots, but then, this shot really I can't get it to the level, that everyone's expecting. So there was a lot of situations like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we learning a lot on that season 1 of Lost in Space is that, and then moving into Last Airbender is that we kind of all knew we were all on the same page. So we were kind of then educating the post team of how we wanted to work in terms of moving references and color files backwards and forwards.
Yeah, I think our post producer's like, wait, you want to look at every single visual effect shot in color? We're like, yes, every single shot. The 3 of us want to be in the room. And he's like, I need to adjust the schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's great having these guys. I mean, I've worked on shows and visual effects supervisors don't even show up. So, to have these guys, learn from these guys. I've learned a lot from them doing this sort of work. And having the trust from them and just being able to sort of go ahead and do it it's been a great process for me.
Yeah, and Siggy's a fresh pair of eyes for us too. We've looked at stuff 30, 40 times by the time it's getting into Siggy, and then it gets to Siggy, and we just look at his, try to judge what his face is doing. Like, is he happy? Is he not happy? Siggy, is it okay? And then we know he's honest. He'll be like, it's mostly okay, but you really screwed up the flesh tones. We're like, okay, we thought we might have done that.
Well, I mean, that's really cool. And I feel like it's something that shows here. It shows in the prior clip we looked at where you got to that 90% that I feel like effects heavy shots usually get to, and then their attention kind of gets shifted onto something else. You're like, all right, it's good enough, ship it, grade it, we're done, but that last 10% of just fluidly exploring, how can we find all the overall image here, whether in color or in VFX or a combination of both, that attention and that love really shows. So great job, guys. I want to see another one. I want to see more.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we, unlike you guys, are seeing these frames for the first time. We at least I can't see the magic tricks going on. Like, walk me through. What am I looking at? What, like, same question I guess as last time. Like, what's the design here? What was captured? What was done afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start really high level. So, the design of the sequence was based on the animated series. And in the animated series, when the moon dies, the color is sucked from the world. And what is left is color from Koizilla, color from any of the fire bending. So, cool light and warm light. And anywhere that light is not touching, it desaturates to black and white. And that was kind of the directive we started with Siggy. And we did one test shot really, really early on and then just tried to figure out, okay, where's the line here? Is visual effects going to deliver you material that looks like this? Or are we going to deliver full color? And we actually started with, okay, we'll do a full color final, and then we'll let VFX take it to the desaturated level once we final it. And the deeper we got into the sequence, we were like, man, we're going to be in trouble if we end up going down this path, because it was so complicated and there was still so much creative on the shot to shot basis of like, it wasn't a plug and play, and Siggy really had to get in there shot by shot and creatively figure out, well, the saturation in this shot is higher, but it feels the same as this shot right before it or after it, because it's just about how much is in frame. So it wasn't as scientific as we thought it was going to be when we started this process. So there ended up being a lot more heavy lifting on Siggy's plate than we initially intended, but that again is the collaboration, and Siggy knows it goes both ways. Where we're like, oh no, we'll get it all. Oh wait, no, Siggy, you're gonna do all of this, and that's what happened in this sequence. It really ended up being a lot more heavy lifting from Siggy than we had initially anticipated, but I think it was the right choice. I think you can talk to the challenges of that heavy lifting.
Yeah, I mean, it was, well, I mean, there's, first of all, it's, we decided not, one of the things we decided not to go fully black and white. So it was trying to figure out a level of saturation that so you could feel the color, but you could still like, it still looked kind of very monochromatic. So then we went through to balance at this early stage. I was on the understanding that this was all, this sort of monochromatic color world was all going to be happening in visual effects. So I was balancing the scene to essentially deliver those looks to visual effects so they could start work on the monochromatic color world. And then there was a session, I'm not sure how it came up. It was like, what do you think if you did the color in black and white? And we did some tests, and I showed them what can be done, what are the issues, but really all the issues that came up we could work through in the color bay. So it ended up then and there that we would handle the sort of the split tone in color, which is along with all the sort of just the regular color correction work, which was quite intense already, adding lens flares, lens reflections, and all that throughout. One of the obviously if there's a flame in shot, the simple thing is to key it and layer it over the black and white. Once again, kind of like the lavender scene, it's always the edges and the going from sort of black and white or flames mixed in with the blue of Koizilla. We also got this magenta fringing, which was once again difficult to
Difficult for Marion.
difficult. So there was a lot of extra layers on top, just cleanup layers to do. And one of the things, once I got into it, because it wasn't necessarily just making the flames themselves color. It was whatever that flame light lit up needed to be colored. So there was a lot of scenes that were had these explosions off camera. So I would sort of manually keyframe the saturation level or the base saturation level up and down as the light would go up and down. So that in itself was quite a lot of work, just to sort of naturally feel like, okay, well, that light wasn't so intense, so raise the saturation a little bit. And then when it would, you get a big explosion, raise the saturation quite a lot. So it was a lot of experimental. The other thing, this was in episode 8, which was one of the last episodes delivered, and there was a lot of shots being turned over at that stage. So it wasn't just like, oh, here's a scene. I know it's a lot of work, but it was like all the other scenes that were being delivered at the same time, which was, I don't know how many shots you were turning over.
A lot.
Yeah, every
There was a day, it was a Saturday, where we had 8 hours, I think we had to do, and our twice. But our post producer is great, and he's like, "This is how much time you have to do to finish the season."
Yeah.
And you don't have enough time. But he brought in 8 balloons and 8 Nutter Butters. And each hour, we popped a balloon, and someone got to eat a Nutter Butter, and we knew we had 1 hour less. And that's how we got through the show.
It's a true story.
You never have enough time to do everything, but you really, we had a really, really strong team, and not only the people that were on the creative side, but the people that were on the production side, and just managing the schedule. And half of the battle on a show like this is managing the schedule and just keeping us in line, because I would work on a shot forever. We would never be done. We'd still be working on it. In fact, we're not quite done. We got a few shots. We're still going to drop in. But that's the reality of a show like this. It is too big to fit in the time you have. So you just do everything you can to make the best show in the time you have.
Yeah, and one of the things we did in these later episodes is we worked in a collaboration mode, which there's no way we wouldn't have been able to do it if it was just a linear process. So especially on episode 8, we'd have multiple people or multiple artists working on that episode simultaneously. I'd be dropping shots in, assistants would be color tracing. I'd have other colorists assisting me sort of in the background. I'd be flagging stuff for them to do. And then there's, me doing my own job, and these guys would split up, and sometimes they'll be in with the editor doing sort of camera shakes on scenes, and someone would have to go back to the office because they were filing shots.
Yeah, it was divide and conquer. But a lot of I can talk a little about the shake pipeline, which Marion, you probably jump in a little more. We do a lot of shakes in color, and part of that is because of this. What do you call the dual pipeline thing? Collaboration mode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, collaboration mode. I don't know the tools and the lingo, but basically, I was told if you do this in color, then you can change it. And if you don't do it in color, then if you try to change something in visual effects, it breaks all of our beauty work. It breaks everything.
Yeah.
And we had previously done a lot of shakes on Lost in Space. Siggy, you were running a lot of the shakes on that. But Mike DeLegal, who was our online editor, was working in collaboration with Marion doing all the shakes. So they would do full on, days, hours of shakes.
Yeah, Jabbar and I, we don't like the way anybody else shakes a frame other than ourselves.
Custom shake.
So even on Stranger Things, I was actually doing all the shakes myself in Nuke. And then I was like, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. I can't do all the shakes in Nuke on this show. So Jabbar was like, no, we need to go back to the pipeline that we had in season 2. We didn't have quite the collaboration we had with Siggy on Stranger Things. So luckily we were back with Siggy and his team. So it was like, okay, we shook everything in the resolve. So then we sat with Mike, and he figured out a way. He's like, all right, what do you guys want your shakes to be like? He built this whole pipeline in the resolve, layered shakes where we could do layered shakes. Like we shake the shit out of everything. It's like large shake, high frequency shakes, large amplitude, mixed with this, mixed with that. And he was up for the challenge. He's like, all right, give me like a day or two and I'll figure out a workflow. And it turned out to be the most awesome workflow. Like we would literally be shaking things live and it's done, Siggy updates, and it's awesome. And we shook hundreds of shots. We would go through the entire episode and shake.
Be more than 100. You might have hit over 1,000 shots. It was a lot of shots. I only know because after your first day, I got an email from Jake, who's our post producer, and he said, I need more time for shake.
More shake time.
The one thing I can add to this sequence too real fast is I was telling Jabbar, we need to do the saturated look, right? So Siggy came up with this extra saturation because at the end of the day, he wanted to be able to tweak the saturation. I'm like, Jabbar, we're going to have to do the saturation. We're going to have to do everything and then do the black and white in 3D. It's going to be easy for us because we have mats for everything. We have Wellzilla, we have fires, we have this, we have that. The problem also with us doing it is the way that Siggy did it, because it was all keyed and rotoed, his naturally got a little bit messy, right? Because he didn't have to have everything perfectly. If we would have done it, I feel like it would have felt a little bit more digital because it would have been so pristine. Again, we can take a mat, we can blur it, blah, 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 and nuke. But when Siggy was doing it, I was watching him, I was like, fuck, this is actually even better than what we should do because he's just doing it in a way and it just felt organic. It felt like, because, pixels could go off of Wellzilla and bleed onto these other pixels. Sorry. So it just felt a bit more natural. And to me, that was like, oh, this is the way to do it because it actually just looks better and it doesn't look too processed, if that's the right word to use. So
that is a super cool insight.
And we love messy.
All right, well, we've already talked for several minutes here, and I do want to leave just a couple minutes for questions from everybody. So let's do this. If you guys have questions for these gentlemen, just put a hand up, and then I'll call on you, and then I'll try to repeat it for you. Yes, right here. Yes.
Hi, so I have a question about these, when they're in the spirit world scene. In the original, they did turn Aang blue, and I was just wondering if you guys ever messed around and played with that aspect of actually changing his coloration, or if you did, what made you be like, no, when I've been smaller than a stick ball?
Skin tones?
So just repeating the question for the record. So in the original show, the Aang turned blue at certain points, and the question is whether you ever considered doing that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if that was discussed.
Yeah, well, it was slightly different, I'll call it rules in terms of color for that. So when we are story-wise in the real world, but Aang is in the spirit world, we had him be blue. So there's a moment where Sokka, Katara, and Aang are all blue. And then once they flip over, there's a shot where the camera kind of turns upside down and they're in the spirit world, then they come back to full color. So that was kind of how we, paid homage to the blue look without being committed to a blue character for scenes and scenes and scenes.
Great. Who else? Right here.
Did you approach the HDR look any differently than the SDR look?
HDR versus SDR look.
No, one of the things we kept we didn't go crazy on the nits for the HDR. I think it was 250. We kept it pretty low. So there really wasn't like a big difference between, a massive difference between SDR and HDR. So SDR and HDR. So no, it was the same look.
Yeah, I think one of the things we found, because we did some tests early on, pushing it further and further, is, we were trying to take the footage that we had, which looked a little bit crisp, it looked a little bit sharp, it looked a little bit elevated, and we were trying to pull it back into something that felt more realistic and had a little bit more grounded realism. And what we found is just by pulling the nits down, it just had a little bit more of that realism to it.
Yeah, it does feel like, just on a related note there, based on just the clips we've looked at today, it feels like in some cases your HDR, you might have been taking advantage of the extra color in a way that didn't travel one-to-one to the SDR, which is kind of fun. That part doesn't get discussed as much.
Yeah, there's a section where everything is red, and that always looks great.
Get that P3.
That Alex versus Rec 709. Yeah,
Cool.
so that. Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Sorry, guys, I had to sneak my question. All right, who else? All the way in the back here.
Thank you. So we recently did a show too. I just wonder, because I would say you guys probably do it, but vendors, VFX, CGI, and how much how much you are involved with the conversation of setting up the color pipeline, and everyone can work on the specific color group, color space, and so it will, I just wonder how the conversation happened in this specific project. So.
Yeah. So the question is, how involved is Siggy in sort of administrating the color pipeline and coordinating with the other stakeholders and vendors?
Yeah, you have your own the visual effects vendors, because, obviously there's multiple vendors. They have their own technical way of setting things up. But it's more, what we do is more pre-color, giving color references, using a CCC format to exchange back and forth, so I can see what changes they've made, and they can see what I've done in terms of color. So it's not necessarily on a technical level in terms of aligning, say, monitors at vendors versus what we see in company 3. It's more about setting looks and moving color files backwards and forwards. Does that make sense?
The one thing I can add, if you're talking about color space, is a lot of times the DPs will work with the DITs, right? In our past, we didn't use, on a lot of episodic, we didn't use ACES, for instance. Now ACES is becoming something that more people are more comfortable with. So they use it on set, right? ACES. So then that obviously helps us coordinate with Company 3 and Siggy. But ultimately, we want Siggy involved, and when we choose our camera, we choose our color workspace. Siggy would also work with the DPs to make sure what's the best color space for the show. And then we'll just try to look up tables. We'll try to adhere to that, obviously, in visual effects from the very beginning, even prior to visual effects, even in camera tests. So,
anybody else? This young man right here.
In the first video we saw, there were a lot of lighting effects, seeing you do windows and light rays and glows for all the fire. How much of that was planned or found in post, or was it considerations of not doing diffusion on set and knowing you were going to do that, or just finding those sorts of looks for creating an environment after that?
How thoroughly planned were the relight effects that we saw in the original clip that we watched when we started our conversation?
I would say it's kind of across the board. It varies, but we, again, worked together a lot on Lost in Space, where we did a lot of lens-based effects. So I knew going in we were going to do a lot of that kind of stuff. The thing that I found was really cool and new were the light rays. We didn't do a lot of those God rays, and they're really effective, and he's got a lot of control over it. So we even had some shots where our vendors could certainly do the God rays. That wasn't an issue, but we were like, don't do the God rays. We're going to do it in color because we can do it in real time with Siggy. We can have control over exactly how much we want, the angle they come in at. So we just started turning it off because it was more effective to do it in color.
Yeah. And there was some scenes where I, just felt like it added, there was, it just needed a little bit of atmosphere. Sometimes we inside, we sort of enhance what was already in camera. You could feel that it was a little bit more, just wanted to feel it sort of an extra layer. But other scenes, it just made sense to give it a little bit more. I sort of darkened sort of the environment a lot more, and then just added it so it just felt like there was some sort of atmosphere or smoke in the room. It was really effective, actually.
Those were great ads, and I love that it's something else that was dynamic and something you could easily iterate on because you're all doing it collaboratively, and it's not something that's baked into a VFX render or something like that.
But there was a few scenes that I did start off, and then there was a couple of one or two shots. I got like 90% of the scene done, and then I tied myself into, in knots trying to get these last two. So there's a lot of tracking and sort of getting the camera movement and the rays looking real, and then holding out foreground options so the rays would go behind. So it's there were some difficulties in it, but I think it was really worth it in the end.
Well, we have spent an hour very quickly on talking about so many fascinating parts of this process. I want to thank my three pals here today for educating us on the craft and the collaboration that went into creating this really, really unique, amazing looking show and these really, really compelling images. Thank you guys so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.